Here's a puzzle for you. How can two countries, right there in Africa, both rich in resources, both former British colonies, both gaining independence in the 1960s, end up on completely, and I mean completely different paths? Well, that's the incredible story we're unpacking today, the tale of Botswana and Nigeria. And you really don't have to take my word for it, because the data speaks for itself. Just look at these charts. On the left, you've got Botswana. See those top two lines for political stability and control of corruption? Pretty steady, right? Consistently high. Now, glance over to the right at Nigeria. Well, it's a totally different picture. The lines are way lower and they're all over the place. This isn't just some minor difference, it's like looking at two different worlds. And that's, right there, leads us to the big question. It's the one that really gets to the heart of what makes a country work or not. How on earth did this happen? To solve this mystery, we're going to follow 5 key clues. We'll start with the data, then dig into their deep history, their colonial past, what they did with their natural wealth, and finally, we'll reach a verdict on what really works. Okay, let's dive right in. First, we really need to get a handle on just how massive this divergence is. The numbers are going to paint a very clear picture for us. And I mean, the data here from 2014 is just stark. Look at corruption. Botswana scores a 63. That's considered very clean, one of the best in the world, not just Africa. Nigeria, a 27. And it's the same story with human development and the quality of their institutions. Botswana is way up there, while Nigeria is struggling near the bottom. The gap is huge. All right, our second clue takes us way back before any colonial flags were ever raised. You know, you have to understand the foundations of a house before you can understand why it's standing strong or falling apart. So on one side, you've got Botswana. It was remarkably unified. About 80% of the people were Tswana. They shared a language, a culture, a real sense of being one people. Then you have Nigeria, which was this incredible, complex mosaic of over 250 different ethnic groups. No single group had a majority. It was a collection of empires, kingdoms, and states, all with their own way of doing things. And here's a brilliant example of what that unity in Botswana looked like in practice. It's this institution called the Kotla. Basically, it was a public assembly. It meant that chiefs couldn't just do whatever they wanted. No, they had to go to the people, listen to them, and get their agreement before making big decisions. Think about that. It's a form of accountability, a kind of democracy that was baked into the culture long before Europeans showed up. Now compare that to Nigeria. It was a complete patchwork. In the north, you had a centralized Islamic caliphate. In the southwest, the powerful Yoruba Empire. And in the southeast, among the Igbo people, you had systems with no central chief at all. You can already see how incredibly challenging it would be to try and forge a single, unified country out of all that. Okay, next clue. This is where the story takes a sharp turn. Because when the British arrived, their colonial approach wasn't one size fits all. It actually sent these two places down a completely forked road. So Britain used this strategy called indirect rule in both places. But wow, was it different. In Botswana, which the British saw as just a dusty, not very valuable territory, their touch was light. They pretty much left those Tswana institutions, like the Kokla, alone. But Nigeria, it was full of resources and people, so their approach was heavy. They didn't just rule from afar. They got right in there, creating new power structures and turning local chiefs into basically paid employees of the British Empire. And this heavy-handed approach created something that scholars have called decentralized despotism. What a phrase, right? But let's break down what that actually means. Suddenly, local chiefs who once had to answer to their own people now had the power of the British Empire backing them up. Their loyalty shifted. They were no longer accountable to their communities, but to their colonial bosses. It turned them into little tyrants in their own lands. So you can see the long-term damage this did. It didn't unite people. It did the opposite. It made ethnic divisions even deeper. It created these networks of corruption where loyalty was bought and sold, and it made building any kind of shared national identity after independence seem almost impossible. Okay, so fast forward to after independence, and boom, both countries hit the jackpot. Diamonds in Botswana and massive amounts of oil in Nigeria. But as we know, that kind of wealth can be a blessing or a terrible curse, and it all came down to what they did next. This is where human choice, where leadership just changes everything. Botswana's first president, Seretse Khama, and the leaders who followed him, they made a very conscious decision. They decided to build modern professional institutions for the good of all. Nigeria, on the other hand, was rocked by military coups and constant political instability. You can't make a 50-year plan when you don't know who's going to be in charge next week. And this, right here, is where Botswana's story becomes truly incredible. They did what so few resource-rich countries ever managed to do. They treated that diamond money not like a lottery win for the elites, but like a national savings account for future generations. They pumped it back into schools, into hospitals. They built a central bank to manage the economy and avoid those wild boom and bust cycles. And they created strong laws, which made foreign companies feel safe investing there. It was smart, it was disciplined, and it worked. Meanwhile, in Nigeria, that oil money, well, it became like a poison. It wasn't a national treasure. It was a prize to be fought over. It poured gasoline on the fire of corruption, it weakened the state, and it turned the question of who gets the oil money into a bitter, often violent source of ethnic conflict. And for the average person, that incredible wealth meant almost nothing for their quality of life. So after looking at all the evidence, the history, the colonialism, the resources, what's the final verdict? What really explains why these two nations went in such different directions? Well, Botswana's success wasn't an accident. It's like they had this incredible recipe. They started with a strong foundation of inclusive traditions. Then, for once, colonialism didn't completely smash that foundation. Add in a dose of ethnic unity and top it off with smart, disciplined leadership, and you get a virtuous cycle of good governance. Nigeria's story was almost the exact opposite. It was dealt a really tough hand to start with, an artificial state mashing hundreds of groups together. Then, a heavy-handed colonial experience made all those divisions even worse. And after independence, the failure to build trusted institutions, combined with a corrupting flood of oil money, created a vicious cycle of instability and graft. And really, this whole tale of two nations boils down to the powerful idea in this quote. A country's success isn't just about its colonial past, and it isn't just about what came before. It's about how those two things interact, and, crucially, about the choices real people and their leaders make along the way. So that leaves us with one final big question to think about. How much is a country's destiny written in stone by its history, and how much is it still up for grabs? I think the story of Botswana and Nigeria shows us that while the past casts a really long shadow, it isn't a prison. The future, it seems, is always a choice.